Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm super excited to share with all of you my initial impressions of the Adept Cosmetics Ninhydrin palette. This is a gorgeous, colorful palette, and it's my first palette from Adept Cosmetics, so I'm really excited to try out their formula with all of you today. In case you're unfamiliar with Adept Cosmetics, they are an indie eyeshadow brand, and they both produce eyeshadows and also empty magnetic palettes. In fact, my first experience with Adept Cosmetics is with their empty magnetic palettes. So I picked up this really large eyeshadow palette for all of my indie shadows. So you can see that it comes in this green faux snakeskin packaging with golden embossments. It kind of looks like a book and opens in half like this. On this side, there is a mirror and also plenty of space for loose eyeshadows. And then on this side, there's no mirror, but another one of these cases. So this is where I store my Terra Moons and my Cleona shadows. And I just love how much space there is in this palette. And it's nice and sturdy. The enclosures are magnetic. So I was pretty impressed with this empty magnetic palette and would definitely recommend this for any of you who do collect a lot of indie shadows. I was also really intrigued though to actually try out their eyeshadow formula, since I've been really interested in Adept Cosmetics branding. Their branding is really nerdy and sciencey, and as a makeup nerd and science nerd myself, I was definitely intrigued. So for example, this palette is called Ninhydrin, which is named after a certain reagent that colors amino acids purple. So that's really useful for applications like fingerprint detection, because the sweat on our fingertips does contain amino acids. And so if you use Ninhydrin, then you can color the fingerprints purple, which allows you to be able to see the fingerprints. So I thought that was pretty cool for a name for a purple palette, because I didn't know what Ninhydrin was before getting this palette, but because of the name, I looked that up and felt like I learned something new. So I am super excited to swatch all of these shades with you all today and try out their formulas. So to start off, let's just take a quick look at the packaging. So the outside is this purple, slightly metallic faux leather with an embossment here that says Ninhydrin. Inside we have 12 gorgeous shadows, 2 mattes and 10 shimmers, and a little mirror on this side. You might notice that I accidentally dug my finger into this shade over here, which was really sad, but I think I was able to smooth it over. Also, it might be a little bit tricky to see this on camera, but this internal packaging here actually has a holographic finish, and so you can see a rainbow shift to it. Hopefully you guys can see that. So I thought that was a pretty fun touch. So without further ado, let's get into these swatches. Here are the first 4 shades finger swatched, starting with ACM 31, which is a slightly cool toned medium dark plum with a matte finish. And I'm getting these shade descriptions from Temptalia. Next we have ACD 18, which is a moderately warm toned light medium pink with a metallic finish. I feel like this is definitely a duochrome. It has a bit of a shift from a champagne gold to a light pink. Then we have ACI 18, which is a moderately warm toned medium dark copper with a metallic finish. This also has a slight duochrome to it. It shifts a little bit between a burgundy and a copper. This one is a really wet formula with a strong metallic sheen. Then we have ACI 22, which is a very warm toned, very dark gold with a metallic finish. This formula feels really interesting on the finger. It's a slightly drier formula than this previous one, and the shimmer particles are a lot smaller, and so it has a really smooth finish to it. Again, this one also seems to have a duochrome effect. It shifts from a green to a gold. And here we have the next 4 shades, starting with ACM 32, which is a very warm toned medium dark green with a matte finish. Then we have ACI 19, a very warm toned medium duochrome with a metallic finish. So this has a really pretty shift from like a dark green to more of an orangey shade to more of a bright pink. Then we have ACI 20, a moderately warm-toned medium purple with a sparkle finish. This is the one that sadly got dug into, but it has such a pretty shift from a periwinkle blue to a violet purple. And then we have ACI 21, which is a very cool toned dark purple with a sparkle finish. I love how this has sort of an ocean blue quality to it. And here we have the last 4 shades, and look how liquid this one is. So first off, we have the namesake of the palette, Ninhydrin, which is a slightly cool toned medium purple with metallic finish. This one also has a slight shift from a light, almost pinky purple to a much deeper, more grungy purple. Then we have ACI 23, a moderately cool toned medium dark purple with sparkle finish. This one definitely has the most liquid effect compared to the rest of the shades, and it has a really pretty finish. I feel like you can see the duochrome aspect pretty clearly. It goes from a pretty dark blue to a really bright magenta purple. Then we have ACI 24, a slightly cool toned medium duochrome with a metallic finish. This is a really fun duochrome. It has everything from pink to blue to a really nice icy turquoise. And finally, we have ACI 25, a moderately warm toned medium duochrome with a metallic finish. And this goes from a bright light green to more of a turquoise blue. And here we have all of the gorgeous shifty shades. So to say that I'm excited about trying out these shades is definitely an understatement. I mean, they looked really pretty in pan, but now that I've swatched them, they're just so fun and so beautiful. I love how there's a wide variety of finishes, even though all of these are at least a little bit dual chromatic in some way, shape, or form. So just to quickly run through the different formulations. So these 2 are the only mattes in the palette. And then we have this shade over here, which is more of a sheer satin duochrome. Then we have these 3 shades that have more of a textured, sparkly finish to them. And then this one has a really unique, almost liquid texture to it. It reminds me a lot of the Danessa Myricks Lightwork 3 palette shadows. And then the rest of them are in more of a metallic finish. So without further ado, let's get these shadows on my eyes. So to start today's look, I'm going to go in with my Wayne Goss number 16 into this matte green shade. And I only have concealer down as a primer since that's what I usually like to do when I try out a new eyeshadow formula. Interesting, I feel like this is coming across a little darker on the lids than it looks in pan. So maybe not the best choice for a transition shade, but at least this means we can get some depth out of this. It's blending out pretty easily though. So here is the matte green just all over the crease area. And for today's look, I really just want to play around with as many of these shadows as possible. So I'm also going to go in now with the Wayne Goss number 17 into this purple shade. And I'm going to sweep this more on the inner half of the crease area. I can't say these are my favorite matte colors. They're a little bit more grungy than what I would typically like. But obviously this palette is mainly for the shimmers. Okay, so definitely not the best blend ever, but it's okay. I'm gonna go back after we add the shimmers and fix up any messiness in the crease area. So in the interest of trying out as many of these shades as possible, I'm gonna first go in with a builder brush into this deep blue shade. This sort of really deep sparkly shade usually yields a lot of fallout, especially if you don't have primer mixing liquid. So let's see how this fares with a brush application. Okay, surprisingly no fallout yet, so that's really good. But a really beautiful kind of oceany shade. And I'm not a huge fan of how the mattes are looking, so I'm gonna take this kind of around where the mattes are as well to kind of cover them up a little bit. And then using the other half of this brush, I'm so intrigued by this almost liquidy shade here. So I'm gonna take that and put it all over the rest of the lid. So far I'm really impressed how all of these are applying with a brush. Usually for these sorts of formulas I would definitely just go in with a finger and also probably go in with some primer or mixing liquid. but so far so good, which is very impressive. This formula is applying very smoothly. As you can see, this one has less of a shimmer sparkle quality to it than the previous one. More of a smooth liquid multichrome. Very pretty. That shade all over the lid would make for a really nice smoky eye. We're gonna keep layering though. So now I'm gonna go in with Ninhydrin, and this one is a little bit more flaky, so I'm gonna try this on a finger and basically dab this all over the center of the lid. Ooh, very pretty purple shade. I will say I wish that Ninhydrin had more of a shift to it since it is the namesake of the palette, but it definitely has the purple represented well. So here is Ninhydrin on the lids. You can see it adds a really beautiful sparkle to the inner portion of the lids. And now, because I very sadly dug into this shade, I do want to use it just to see how it is. This one has such a wet feeling to it. So I'm gonna dab this in the, whoa, wow, do you guys see that? That's so pretty. Wow, that really, really catches the light. Okay, wow, that looks so liquid. Man, I should have put this on the center of the lid. Ooh-wee. So pretty. This might be the star of this palette. So sad that I dug my finger into it. But it does have a really pretty light blue to lavender shift. Wow, so nice. Alrighty, so now for cleanup duty, I'm gonna go in with my Rephr number 14 brush back into this purple shade and just kind of lightly sweep this around the edges just to make sure that everything is nicely blended. I love how easy it was to manipulate the shimmers with a finger. It made application just so seamless. And then with my builder brush, I'm just gonna lightly zhuzh the edges of the shimmers where they meet each other, just to make sure there's no harsh edges. And I wanna go into more of the green tones for the lower lash line, so I'm gonna focus on this shade down here and just sweep this all over my eye bag. Again, I do feel like the green shade doesn't actually come across as green on the lids as you'd think based on how it looks in pan. It has a much darker base to it than what you'd expect. Not necessarily a problem, but just a little bit surprising. And looking at things now, there is a little bit of fallout from that original blue shade that I put on the outer corner. Not a huge amount, but definitely a little bit. So with the tip of my builder, I'm gonna go into this shade over here and put this all over the outer 2/3 of the lower lash line. This is a really fun shade. It does a good job, I think, of tying in the purple and blues with a slight greenishness as well. So hopefully you guys can see a little bit of the shift in that shade. And then with my Rephr number 2 brush, I'm going into this green shade. I'm putting this on the inner third. This is a little bit more of a chunky formulation. So this one might be a little bit better wet, but I think I'm able to build it up. Really pretty green shade. And now for the inner corner, I'm going in with my Pencil Pro from Sonia G into this rosy shade. I would normally not use this for inner corner, but I am just curious about it and do want to use as many of the shades as possible. This is a really nice sparkly shade, so I think it'll catch the light well. Has some of that rose gold quality to it. And then for the brow bone, I'm going into this satin shade and just, wow, oh my gosh, that is really, wow, I was not expecting that. Hopefully you guys can see, it really has a very bright gold, almost slightly neon green effect. Huh. Wow. When I swatched this, because it looked so satin, I wasn't really expecting a lot of payoff. So, wow, it does really capture the light though. Wow, so pretty. If you want something less sparkly, but still really high impact, I think this shade is really great to use. Alrighty, so here is the final eyeshadow look. So I managed to use all of the shades other than these two, and I don't really think there's any more real estate on my lids to fit these two on, so I'll definitely have to use those in another look. But overall, I'm quite pleased with how this eyeshadow look turned out. So I'm going to go off camera now and just finish off the rest of my look and then be back with my overall thoughts and initial impressions about this palette. So here we have the final look. In case you're curious what else I have on my face today, for foundation I used a mix of my LYS foundation in LG6 and my Pat McGrath foundation in LM13. My current skin tone is kind of between these two, so I find that using a pump of each just gives a really good shade match. For concealer, I went in with the ABH Magic Touch Concealer in the shade 7. For my brows, I have my Kosas Brow Pencil and Brow Gel. For powder, I went in with my Kosas Setting Powder in the shade Comfy. For bronzer, I have my Chantecaille bronzer in the shade Goa. For blush, I went in with my favorite Desert Orchid from Pat McGrath. This is just a perfect accompaniment for colorful looks like today's. For highlighter, I went in with my Divine Rose highlighter from Pat McGrath, since I think this pink to champagne gold shift is kind of similar to what I have on my brow bone. For lips, earlier today I was wearing my M Cosmetics lip cushion in the shade Venetian Rose. But to finish the look, I switched that out for my Huda Beauty lip contour in the shade Honey Beige, and then topped it with Nude Romance from Charlotte Tilbury. So overall, I am really pleased with this look and so excited to have this palette in my collection. I mean, these shades looked beautiful in online swatches, in the pictures, but they're honestly so much more beautiful in person. It's always so hard to really be able to see the shine and the shift in duochromes or multichromes when you're just looking at them in pictures or videos. So I really can't wait to create looks using all of these shadows. I was especially impressed with how well these shadows performed on my lids, having only concealer as a primer. As I was finishing off this look, I did see a little bit of blue fallout, which I think was mostly from this shade and maybe a little bit from these shades. But it was really a tiny amount of fallout, considering that I put that blue shade all over my outer third and diffused it upward. Usually that would be a complete disaster for a shimmer shade with no eyeshadow primer or mixing liquid involved. And surprisingly, the sparkly shimmer shades had no fallout to them, at least in today's look. So that was really impressive. All of the shadows were super easy to apply to the lids, to blend out, to blend into each other. And I was really impressed that I was able to create a really beautiful cohesive look with essentially all the shades other than these two over here. And I think these two are actually especially flexible, and so you could create a really gorgeous look incorporating these shades with really any of the other ones. Overall, I would say if you are a huge fan of eyeshadows, if you like different sorts of textures and finishes and some dual chromatic sparkly effects, I would highly recommend checking out Adept Cosmetics. Now I really want to pick up some of their other palettes as well. I think Ninhydrin in particular is really great if you like more grungy tones, if you like purples, blues, greens, and a smattering of pinky gold. The look I created today is definitely half purple and blue on the top and then half green turquoise on the bottom. And then on the inner corner and brow bone, it has a little bit more of that pink to gold. And the shades I didn't use have that pink to green. So overall, I think the palette actually ties together really well, even though when you first look at this, it kind of looks like a rainbow palette. But because all of the shimmers do have some shift to them, the shifts just kind of tie everything together such that you can still create a really cohesive look, even if you use a lot of these shadows in the same look. Also, I have to say that I love how this is like the perfect complement to the dress that I'm wearing today. I wore this dress because I wasn't really sure what direction I was going to take with this look, and I assumed I would just use a couple of the shimmer shades, but remarkably I was able to use most of them, and I think there's just a really nice match between this dress and this palette. So on the whole, I am extremely impressed. I have nothing bad to say about this palette, which if you guys have been watching my videos for a while, you know that's pretty rare. Usually my first impressions are much more of a mixed bag, even if it's a product that I end up loving later on. People often say that indie brands do it better, and I would say definitely in this case that has borne out. Sometimes with indie shadows, you do have to deal with a lot more flakiness and fallout. It just kind of comes with the territory of the more sparkly, shifty shades. So if you've been turned off by that aspect of indie brands in the past, I would highly recommend checking out Adept Cosmetics. I mean, none of these are necessarily extreme multichromes, but they all have a beautiful shift to them. They all have a beautiful shine. There's such a variety of textures and finishes, and it comes in a convenient palette form. So I think if you haven't really worked with indie shadows before, or if you're kind of intimidated at buying single shadows, this is a really great way to go because it really feels like you are buying a normal eyeshadow palette, except all of the formulations are so exceptional and the ease of use is incredible. So that's it for today's video. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I would love to hear down in the comments below if you guys have tried Adept Cosmetics. If so, which palettes have you tried out and how have you liked them? Like I said, after this experience, I really want to pick up more of their palettes. If you look on their website, their palettes do tend to have a really long back order to them, so it takes a little time to get them in the mail. In my experience with this palette, it actually arrived way sooner than what I expected. It was supposed to arrive sometime in the spring, but then it actually arrived like a couple weeks after I placed the order. So I was pleasantly surprised with how quick the shipping was. But I would love to hear down below what your guys' experience with this brand has been. And in general, if you guys love indie eyeshadows, I would love to hear your favorite brands and shadows. So thank you all so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!